Well, I know I've been a bit of a bad news bear the last couple of weeks. Markets have been going nowhere but south, but today, finally, on Friday, we got a bit of an up day. In fact, quite an up day. We had the Dow up over 200 points, Toronto's lead index over 350 points, oil back into the $32 range after trading down into the $28 range or so this week. And the loonie had a positive day as well. It's back up over 70 cents, not by a lot, but at least we're back into the sevens and not the sixes. So that's a nice way to end a week, which actually was quite tumultuous on the political side. We've got our new Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, in Davos this week, speaking to an international forum of wealthy business tycoons and political leaders and policy wonks. And some of his comments caused more than a stir here in Alberta. He used what I think a lot of people regard as code language by talking about Canada's need to be viewed as a nation of resourcefulness, quote unquote, rather than a nation of resources. I think a lot of people here took offense at that, and rightly so. Our resources are in fact quite resourceful. We have a lot of innovators in the oil and gas industry. We wouldn't have an oil sands, a viable oil sands today, if not for the innovation that's been shown by generations of engineers and other scientific people who have made that resource work and make it viable. Unfortunately, you know, the news also was not so positive out of Quebec. We had Montreal Mayor Denis Coderre pouring cold water on Energy East, a badly needed pipeline that's been proposed by TransCanada that would run from Western Canada, from Alberta, through Ontario, Quebec, and to the Irving Oil Refinery in New Brunswick. He was quite dismissive of it, said some very disparaging things about TransCanada. Frankly, I think it was quite irresponsible. I mean, this is a mayor of a city who thinks nothing of dumping raw sewage into his river, but apparently is unwilling to even consider a project that isn't even before the national energy regulators at this point. So very unfair. A little bit more positive news out of Ontario. Our Premier, Rachel Notley, met with Kathleen Wynne, the Premier of Ontario, to discuss Energy East. And although Wynne is not yet ready to endorse the project, she was a little bit more amenable, a little bit more supportive in her language after their meeting, talking about the conversation being quote unquote easier now that Alberta has a climate change plan and is moving forward on the environmental and sustainability front. So let's hope that's a bit of a tip-off. What concerns me the most is whether our Prime Minister, who ultimately is going to have to make the call on these pipelines, is going to repeat what we saw here in Alberta in the 1980s, the National Enegry Program. I'm not suggesting for a moment that he's looking to repeat the specifics of that program, which effectively involved confiscating Alberta's oil wealth. But in fact, the net result of the fence sitting that the Prime Minister has displayed thus far on these pipelines would have the same net impact on Alberta. That is to dissuade further investment in our oil and gas industry at a time when Alberta desperately needs it, and in fact the national economy desperately needs it. So let's hope in the next 2 or 3 months, when the Prime Minister is committed to sitting down with the premiers to discuss the nation's climate change policies and strategy going forward, that he begins to move off the fence and is willing to support at least one of the pipeline projects that are now before us. The country needs it, the province needs it, the energy industry certainly needs it. And for all Canadians, it's time to get behind projects that are going to move our nation forward economically, politically. I'm Gary Lamphier for the Edmonton Journal.